Chapter 251. But, Orissa still had the ointment in her hand as she looked at the man that just changed his mind. Nevertheless, Benjamin did not want her to notice any oddities, so he said, "Be quiet. I'm going to take a nap." Orissa puckered her lips. What a temperamental guy. So be it then. It's your body, after all. I won't feel bad for you. Thus, Orissa turned around and went to the bathroom. When she got out, she noticed that Benjamin had closed his eyes. She was not sure whether he was asleep. Then, she touched her stomach. Even though she had some soup not long ago, she was still quite hungry, so she silently went for the door. However, as soon as she placed her hand on the door, she heard the man's voice. "Where are you going?" Orissa froze for a moment and turned to look at the man with his back to her. "Does he have eyes at the back of his head? You said you wanted to sleep, right? So I thought I'd go out and get something to eat." Then, Benjamin turned around and stared right into her soul. "Call the guards to come in." Orissa did not know what he wanted to do but still opened the door and asked the bodyguards to come in. "Mr. Graham," they greeted. Benjamin shot a glance at them and said, "Go ask Drawbridge Dining to make some food and send it over here." "Yes, sir." They went out immediately after. Orissa was taken aback by what she heard as her heart stirred. She was about to say something, but Benjamin cut her off. "Come here." Orissa looked at him and was willing to look past his commanding tone, seeing that he had ordered food for her. Hence, she closed the door and went over to Benjamin. "What is it? I have an itch on my shoulder. Help me soothe it," he said as he turned around. So, Orissa placed her hand on Benjamin's shoulder and started scratching. "Higher. Here." She adjusted the position and continued. "Harder." Benjamin knitted his brows as it got itchier the more Orissa scratched. Following Benjamin's instruction, Orissa applied a bit more force. Benjamin's shoulder was rather stiff, but he had a higher body temperature than Orissa, so it felt warm to her touch. And as she scratched, Orissa's eyes began to wander downward. The curves and lines on the man's back were immaculate and brimming with power. Orissa gulped as she was unknowingly being attracted to the man. That said, she quickly snapped out of it and focused her attention back on her current task. And after a while, Benjamin actually fell asleep, probably because of how comfortable it was. Hearing the man's long steady breathe, Orissa took a peek to make sure before she carefully pulled the blanket over Benjamin. At that moment, Benjamin's phone suddenly rang, so Orissa took his phone and saw that it was Darius calling. She suddenly got thrown between a rock and a hard place as she did not know whether to pick up or not. Then, she looked at Benjamin. And as soon as a single crease appeared on his forehead, she immediately denied the call. "Let's just let him sleep for a little." On the other end of the line, Darius was infuriated to see that Benjamin had denied his call. "You little bastard, how dare you deny my call?" Kingsley smiled. "Mr. Graham, maybe he's just really busy right now. Why don't you call him later?" Hearing that, Darius grumbled for a bit and decided to take Kingsley's advice. After that, Orissa turned on silent mode for Benjamin's phone and placed it on the side. "I wonder how the kids are doing at home right now." She walked to the balcony and closed the door behind before she called Zachary. "Mommy, have you had dinner yet, sweetheart?" "We aren't done eating, Mommy. Grandpa wants you and Benjamin to come home for dinner," Zachary said after taking a look at Darius, who was still very much annoyed. "Grandpa, you guys are with your grandpa?" Orissa asked after a moment's thought. "Benjamin's father? Yeep. We're at Grandpa's house right now. He called that man just now, but he didn't answer. Are you coming over?" "Mommy, how did the kids get to old Mr. Graham's place? Did he call Benjamin to tell him to go home for dinner?" Orissa looked at the man sleeping in the ward, perplexed, before she said, "I'm not going back tonight. Please behave at your grandpa's house." "Okay. Listen to him." "Okay, Mommy. But why aren't you coming back? Are you afraid to meet Grandpa? He's a very nice guy, Mommy. He took us to some places and had a lot of delicious foods. I think he likes us a lot, especially Jessie. He doesn't seem to want to let go of her. Grandpa would definitely like you, Mommy. Don't worry, Mommy." Chapter 252. Orissa was relieved to hear the children's happy voice and, at the same time, happy to hear that Darius liked the kids. I have something going on right now, so I can't go. Your daddy's also not available, so we're not having dinner with you guys. We're not going back either, so be nice and listen to your grandpa. What happened, Mommy? Why aren't you guys coming home? Zachary was astonished. At the same time, Gavin also heard Zachary when he came over to call him. Mommy's not coming back. Why aren't you coming home, Mommy? Gavin asked as well. We have a social event to attend, so I doubt we can go back. You guys wash up and rest early. You'll definitely see me tomorrow morning. Orissa did not tell them Benjamin was hospitalized so they would not worry. Then don't drink too much at night, Mommy. Stay safe, Zachary urged. Don't worry, Mommy. We'll be going back after dinner, Gavin said to Orissa. Orissa smiled. You guys can stay there overnight. There's no need to hurry back since we're not there. Stay there and keep Grandpa company. Tomorrow's the weekend anyway, so spend some more time with him. Orissa figured it was a good idea since she was in the hospital and could not spend time with them. So, instead of the children staying at home alone, it was better for them to spend time with Darius. Okay, Mommy, Gavin nodded. Mommy, Grandpa's actually eager to see you. It's a shame that you can't make it. He asked the chef to make a lot of delicious food and even asked us what you like to eat. Zachary told her. Orissa smiled. Maybe next time. I'll pay him a visit when I'm free. So, tell Grandpa that we can't join him for dinner because of the social event. Orissa did not expect Darius to want to meet her that quickly, so she was a little unprepared. On top of that, Benjamin was still in the hospital, so there was no way she could leave. At the very least, Benjamin needs to be there when we go and see his father. Besides, Benjamin has never even thought of bringing me to meet his parents, so it'd be inappropriate to meet his father out of the blue. Okay, I'll go tell Grandpa right now. Zachary handed the phone to Gavin and ran over to Darius. Grandpa, my mommy, and Benjamin went to attend a social event. They won't be able to make it back for dinner. A social event. Darius was surprised to hear that. Doesn't he hate attending social events? What happened? Don't tell me the children's mother is afraid to see me. Darius laughed. It looks like my eagerness has scared my future daughter-in-law. No worries, there's always next time. Zachary smiled and said, yeah, Mommy said she'll visit when she finds the time. Great. Darius responded with a hearty laugh and ruffled the little boy's head. Gavin saw that and happily told Orissa, Mommy, Grandpa says you can come over next time for a meal. Sure. Orissa could actually hear Zachary since he was very loud. Sweetheart, Mommy still got work to do, so go finish your dinner. Okay, bye, Mommy, Gavin replied. Bye, sweetheart. Orissa gave her phone an audible kiss before finally ending the call. Coincidentally, the bodyguards came back with food in their hands. Miss York, your food is here. Okay, thank you. Orissa nodded with a smile. You guys go eat as well. We're still on duty right now. We'll eat when we change shifts, so I'll leave you to it, Miss York. If you need anything, feel free to tell us. We'll get it for you, the bodyguard said before he went out. Okay, Orissa smiled. They have shifts. After catching a whiff of the aroma from the food, her stomach started rumbling. So, Orissa quickly headed over to the coffee table and munched down the food in front of her. Drawbridge Dining's food is the best. After that, Orissa let out a sigh of ineffable satisfaction as her stomach was thoroughly conquered by the delicious food. At that moment, all those miserable memories of being ordered around got washed away as well. Chapter 253. At the old manor, Darius brought his 5 grandchildren and Kingsley as well as Sean to eat but was interrupted by an unexpected visit. Mr. Graham, Zayden is here again, Edwin informed Darius. In an instant, all 5 of the little kids frowned and looked at Darius. Ask him to leave, Darius scoffed. What a killjoy. Edwin noted Darius' order and backed away to send Zayden off. I kindly ask that you leave, Mr. Adams. Mr. Graham is not accepting any visitors today. Edwin, this is a gift for Mr. Graham. Can you please help me hand it to him? Zayden proceeded to raise the gift he had in his hand. However, Edwin took a look and said, Mr. Adams, you should bring it back as well. Mr. Graham is not going to accept this. As soon as Edwin finished, he turned and went inside, completely ignoring Xaden in the process. Xaden took a peek inside the manor and saw that it was brightly lit. Nevertheless, he could not see Darius, which gave him quite the headache. Be it Benjamin Graham or Darius Graham, Xaden did not get to meet either of them, not even Gavin Graham. When he got news about the kids, Xaden rushed to the school, but they had already been taken away and were not at the school anymore. Since both Benjamin and Darius were very adamant, there was no way for Xaden to plead for Donna. The only option left was through Gavin. So, Xaden hovered at the door for a little longer before he eventually left. Meanwhile, Darius was unaffected by the visit, as he invited the kids and 2 adults to eat with him. Come, everyone, eat up. Darius delightfully started placing food on the children's plate. Eat whatever you want, and tell me if you can't reach it, okay? Thank you, Grandpa, the 5 said simultaneously. Their sweet and adorable voice was loved by all. Darius was looking at them with a bright smile on his face. I can never get enough of this. Oh, are you having problems with the drumstick, Jesse? Let me tear it up for you, okay? Darius asked, seeing that Jesse did not have any front teeth. Thank you, Grandpa, but I can eat it on my own. The little girl said and bit down once again and slowly munched away at the drumstick. Meanwhile, Gavin cut some meat up and placed it on Jess's plate. Thanks, Gavin. When Jessie smiled, her eyebrows formed a perfect crescent, and dimples would appear on both sides of her cheeks, not to mention the gap between her teeth. She looked adorable, and everyone watched in amusement. At the same time, Sean and Kingsley also had their eyes glued to the 5 siblings, relentlessly filling up their plates with food and completely forgetting about themselves. Grandpa, Uncle, you guys need to eat too, Jessie reminded as she looked at them. Oh, right. Darius laughed and picked up his utensils after seeing the kids enjoying themselves. Grandpa, the Chanan food here tastes so good. Oliver narrowed his eyes as the heat from the food fogged his glasses. Kingsley was amused and said, Oliver, take off your glasses when you eat. But I won't be able to see if I take them off. Oliver replied. Then, he took his glasses off, wiped them clean, and put them back on again. Darius' heart ached to see Oliver that way, so he asked, how bad is your eyesight, Oliver? Maybe let Sean have a look and see if he could fix it for you with surgery. What he said sounded silly to Sean since Sean was not an ophthalmologist, but he answered, okay. So, Oliver told Darius about his eyesight. It's around 300 degrees, Grandpa. Mommy told me that my glasses could help adjust my eyesight, so my eyes will be fixed after wearing them for a year. I don't need to go through surgery. Darius was astonished. Does technology like that actually exist? Sure does. The little fellow nodded. Grandpa, the doctor said that Oliver won't need to wear glasses anymore if he wore that for a few years. Jasper looked at Darius with a smile. That's good then. It's much safer than going through eye surgery. Darius nodded. Sean smiled and said, don't worry, Mr. Graham. It's common for people to have eyesight problems these days. Wearing glasses isn't that much of a big deal. Darius was a little annoyed when he heard that. How is it not a big deal? It's inconvenient to do anything while wearing glasses. Sean smiled in response. Grandpa, I've already gotten used to it. There's no such problem, Oliver said while his eyes narrowed as he smiled. Chapter 254. Here, have some beef. Darius said as he cut the 5 children a slice of roast steak each. Thank you, Grandpa, you should eat more too. Gavin did the same for Darius. And Darius was pleasantly surprised by it. This little guy has always eaten while quietly ignoring everyone around him. He has changed so much, having been gone for only a few days. Does being with his siblings influence him this much? After that, Zachary, Oliver, Jasper, and Jessie all followed suit and placed different dishes on Darius' plate. Grandpa, don't just look at us. Eat up. If not, we might finish everything. Jessie said with her missing front teeth, adorable to no end. Darius was delighted. Don't worry. If you finish them, we can ask them to make some more. Jessie, What about me? Where's mine? I might start ignoring you from now on, Kingsley teased the little girl. Jess's eyes immediately darted toward Kingsley, and she proceeded to try and fork some food over to him. Uncle Kingsley, you're too far away, move your plate closer. Kingsley was ecstatic, so he handed his plate over and let Jessie put food in it. Thank you, Jessie. You're welcome. Jessie sat down once again and started munching her food. Jessie, what about me? You shouldn't have favorites, you know. Sean smiled as he looked at Jessie. So, Jessie shifted her beady gaze toward him. What would you like to eat, Uncle Sean? Sean smiled and gave Kingsley a smug look. I like shrimps. So, Jessie took a few pieces of shrimp and placed them on his plate. Good girl. Sean took one shrimp and peeled the shell off before placing it on Jess's plate. Jessie looked at him. Why did you give it to me, Uncle Sean? Because I feel like it. Sean smiled at her endearingly. Thank you, Uncle Sean. Jessie was overjoyed. Do you guys want some shrimp? Sean asked the other 4 kids. Yes, please. They all nodded. With that, Sean took up the responsibility of deshelling the shrimps and gave some to Darius first before distributing them evenly between the children. Thank you, Sean. Darius, lips curled. You're most welcome, Mr. Graham. After all, I'm the one enjoying a free meal here. This is the least I could do, Sean responded with a smile. Kingsley laughed when he heard that. Based on what you just said, I would be ashamed of myself if I don't help out. Then, he took a crab and started deshelling it. The kids were all thrilled and took one each to deshell for the 3 adults. What are you guys doing? Just let me do it. Kingsley looked at the 5 children funnily. Mommy said that we should always return a favor. So, if you're doing it for us, we should do it for you. Zachary was very serious about deshelling the crab. So, other than Jessie, who did not quite do it right, the 4 brothers all did superbly and distributed the deshelled crabs to Darius, Sean, and Kingsley. All 3 adults were very happy to see that. Darius looked at the 4 kids raised by Arissa and was very satisfied to see that they were all very polite and respected their elders. Their mother has taught them well. It left a very good impression in Darius' mind. She's way better than that pretentious Donna. In the end, the biological mother is still the best. Then, Darius looked at Gavin, relieved to see that the boy was fitting in and getting along happily. The boy did not smile much when he was with Benjamin, but Darius had already seen more smiles from him in just one day. Here, wipe your hands with this. Darius took a towel and got up to help the kids wipe their hands. Thanks, Grandpa, but we can do it ourselves. Jasper wanted to wipe his hand, but Darius dodged him. Let me do it. I like it. All right then, Grandpa, thank you. The little child's cutesy voice was very endearing, and Darius just could not stop smiling. Chapter 255. Sean and Kingsley both had a grin on their faces as they watched Darius get along with the kids. The more they were with the kids, the happier they got. How lucky of Benjamin to suddenly have 5 kids. The 2 men felt jealous. They're just so adorable. Kingsley sighed. I wish I could take them home, he said while looking at the 5 identical children. Sean looked at him and smirked. You can always make one. That's easier said than done. Tell me, how is Benjamin this lucky? 5 kids in one go. He definitely won the game of life here. Truth be told, Sean was also jealous of Benjamin. Gavin, is it okay for you and your brothers and sister to come home with me tonight? Sean asked the little guy with a bright smile on his face. Benjamin's hospitalized, after all. He can't go home, which means I can have fun with the kids at my place. Sorry, Uncle Sean, we can't. Gavin rejected him. Darius was thrilled to hear that and stroked Gavin's head affectionately. Yes, don't go. Stay here with Grandpa. Sean looked at them in amusement. Why not? If you guys don't like to go back with him, maybe come back with me instead. My house is definitely a fun place, Kingsley chimed in. Gavin puckered his lips when he heard that. Uncle Kingsley's place is not fun at all. We're not going to your place either. Kingsley was devastated. But Gavin, I have a lot of figurines at my place. Gavin gave Kingsley a smug look and said, my brothers have a lot too. He was very proud of it. Jasper nodded as well. Uncle Kingsley, do you have more figurines than I do? You'll need to come home with me to find out then. How about it? You coming? Can you two stop tempting my grandchildren? They're staying with me tonight to keep me company, period. Darius huffed and shot the two a glare. Sean and Kingsley smiled in response. Zachary nodded and said to Darius, "Don't worry, Grandpa. We won't go with them. We'll stay here tonight. I hope you won't think it's too noisy." Of course not. I'm ecstatic. I would never think that of you kids no matter how long you stay here. Darius smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. Back then, he could not even get Gavin to stay the night since Benjamin would always leave right after dinner and head back to Yaleview. Then, "We're sorry for bothering you in advance, Grandpa." Jasper agreed after seeing his two brothers saying they would stay. "It's not a problem at all. My little sweethearts, you can stay however long you want and come visit me whenever you feel like it." Darius sat down and asked the housekeeper to prepare some more food. "Are we not going back?" Oliver asked Zachary. "No, Mommy and Benjamin are busy with work, so they aren't going home. She said that we should stay here and keep Grandpa company," Zachary whispered into Oliver's ear. Oliver understood and gave it some thought before he said, "Do you think Mommy and Daddy are out on a date right now?" Zachary looked at the excited Oliver. "You think so?" "Of course." Oliver smiled as his eyes lit up. The corner of Zachary's mouth twitched. "You greedy boy. Can't you control yourself? Look at you, calling him daddy already." Darius smiled when he saw the two boys secretly whispering to each other. Sean and Kingsley both knew what was going on with Benjamin and Arissa, but they merely kept it a secret and smiled. Right then, Darius looked at them. "Benjamin went to a social event. Do you two know where that is?" Kingsley immediately shook his head in response. Sean followed shortly after and said, "I've not seen him today, Mr. Graham." "How would I know where he went?" Hearing that, Kingsley gave Sean a side-eye stare. This guy really knows how to lie through his teeth. Chapter 256. Darius' eyes glinted. After all, he wasn't born yesterday, and he was still very sharp for his age. They rushed off that afternoon and returned in high spirits a few hours later. When they were asked about what they had been up to, they simply stayed quiet. Could Benjamin be in trouble? He hasn't returned any of my calls yet. Darius didn't move and continued eating with his grandchildren. After eating, he asked his butler to call Ethan and ask about Benjamin's whereabouts. "Mr. Graham, he went out. I didn't go with him. He went out with Miss York. Jasper and the others will go and fetch them when they're done," Ethan fibbed. Benjamin's condition was already stable, but Ethan didn't feel like telling old Mr. Graham that Benjamin was in the hospital this late at night. He didn't want to cause them to overreact and leak the news to the media. "Where did they head off to?" Edwin asked. "Oh, there's another call coming in, so I need to go. Call Mr. Graham for anything else, okay?" Ethan immediately made up an excuse so he could hang up. Edwin raised an eyebrow and reported, "Something seems fishy." Benjamin was definitely not at a business gathering, because if he was, Ethan would know the venue. He probably knew and was purposely hiding it from them. Darius nodded. "Call Benjamin again." Back in the hospital, Benjamin was finally awake. Arissa immediately rushed toward him and helped him sit up. "Are you feeling better?" Benjamin glanced at her and said, "I'm going to the washroom." "Slow down." Arissa bent down and took his slippers. He looked at her strangely, curious as to why she was suddenly doing all this. She was acting like his wife, and doing all of this was completely natural. She didn't know what he was thinking and simply helped him put his shoes on so he could go to the restroom. Benjamin washed his hands and quickly washed his face too before walking out. "Are you feeling better?" Arissa stood waiting in front of the door and immediately started helping him to his bed. "I'm a little tired." Benjamin was actually feeling much better after resting, but he purposely said that to mislead Arissa. "Then go and lie down again." Arissa clearly didn't catch on. Benjamin's eyes gleamed and he leaned toward her, putting on a weak act. She helped him onto the bed and took off his shoes for him. She was already treating him like he was crippled. Benjamin almost laughed out loud. "Do you think I'm crippled or something?" "Huh, stunned," Orissa looked up and immediately her face reddened under his teasing gaze. You're still sick, aren't you? I just wanted to help. Benjamin was still looking at her while sitting up on the bed. She avoided his gaze but continued to glance at him and noticed that the red flush on his face had already begun to subside. She chuckled and said, the redness seems to be fading. Since you're already feeling better, I bet you'll be fit to go tomorrow. Benjamin looked at his arms, which were already much better than before. He no longer felt the itching on his body either, which meant that the medicine was working. Ah, right, your dad called you, but since you were sleeping, I hung up. Zachary said that he probably wanted to ask you to go home for dinner, so I told both Zachary and Gavin that we went to a meeting and that they should spend the night at their grandpa's place, Orissa suddenly mentioned. Benjamin raised an eyebrow at the sound of Darius calling him. Did he call me just to go home for dinner? Orissa met his intense gaze and she murmured, I think so. He just scoffed lightly and reached out toward her. Can I have my phone? She passed him his phone and he unlocked it to see that he had, in fact, received a call from Darius about an hour ago. He was just about to call him. Back when Edwin's name popped up on his screen. Chapter 257. Benjamin picked up his phone and held it to his ear. Hello. His deep, calm voice betrayed nothing of his current situation. Orissa glanced at him and sat aside. He glanced back at her before saying, yeah, I am caught up with something. Is Dad around? The butler immediately passed the phone to Darius. Where have you been, little punk? You didn't pick up my calls. Darius' voice sounded really strict. Benjamin's eyes glinted and he replied, I was in a meeting and didn't notice your call. Orissa continued to look at him. I wanted to ask you to bring Gavin's mom back for dinner today, but you didn't pick up, Darius grumbled. Bring her back tomorrow, all right. Benjamin frowned. He didn't know if he would recover by tomorrow. It wasn't exactly troublesome to do anything, but he still felt uncomfortable seeing anyone in his current situation. I'll let you know again tomorrow. I might still be busy. Are you actually so busy that you can't even come home for just one simple meal? Do you think you're the president or something? How long has it been since you came back to eat with us? It's starting to look like you don't even want to bring her home. Darius, nagging was giving Benjamin a headache and he massaged his brow with a sigh. I'll bring her back once I have time. Darius just scoffed. Since you're so busy, then I'll take care of Gavin and the others until you're finally free enough to spend some time with them. After that, he hung up angrily. Benjamin listened to the annoying beeps and tossed his phone aside. After that, he stood up. When Orissa saw him starting to stand up, she immediately rushed over to help him. Where are you going? Benjamin's handsome face was extremely close to hers and she backed away slightly. He glanced at her and replied, I need to take a shower. The sticky ointment all over his body made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Orissa frowned. You haven't completely recovered yet. I don't think you should take a shower for now. What does my allergy have to do with taking a shower? Benjamin side-eyed her. Orissa was about to speak but hesitated. He shouldn't be allowed to shower, right? I'll feel much better once I take a shower, Benjamin said and walked toward the bathroom. Orissa couldn't do anything except to let him go. What are you waiting for? Come here. He suddenly turned to look back at her. In shock, she replied, why? I can't reach some places because my arm hurts. You have to help me, he said in a serious tone. You are going to help me. Orissa blushed and glared at the man in front of her in disbelief before pointing at herself. You want me to help you shower? Benjamin scoffed. See, you can't even help me out with such a small request. Orissa's mouth twitched. How is this a small request? You only got a jab. How much could your arm hurt? She rebutted. She still couldn't believe it. How does he dare to ask her for something so embarrassing? Does he have no shame? His expression darkened and he said, you can leave. Orissa gritted her teeth and finally dragged her feet over after a long bout of internal battles. She couldn't leave before he was completely recovered. Besides, she had technically agreed to help him. It's just a shower, right? I'll just pretend that I'm giving my son a bath. Benjamin smirked as she walked toward him and said, I thought you didn't want to do it. Orissa looked at him in disdain before pulling him over by the collar and unbuttoning his shirt. "Lift your arms." Benjamin followed suit and Orissa began to take off his shirt and his belt. He looked at her as she bent down to undo his belt and he felt her warm breath against his stomach. Benjamin's gaze darkened and his mouth felt dry. Orissa finally undid his belt and unbuttoned his pants. "Be careful," he said, his voice slightly raspy. "I know," Orissa said as she blushed while slowly inching his pants down. As long as she didn't feel awkward, everything would be fine. Chapter 258. She purposely ignored him and turned on the shower. After testing the temperature of the water, she finally directed it to him. After that, she started lathering him up with body soap. She glided it all over his shoulders, his back and his arms. She didn't dare to use anything to scrub his body due to his inflamed skin, so all she could do was use her hands. Benjamin swallowed and felt his body begin to flush. The moment Orissa reached his waist, he nearly stopped breathing. There was a flush of emotions behind his eyes and he gritted his teeth. "Leave now." Orissa paused and looked at him in confusion. Everything was going fine, so what's going on? "It's not done yet. Get out." Benjamin's voice was pressed deep with control. Orissa just shrugged in defeat. "Then I'll go. Call me if you need anything." Orissa was simply in disbelief and she washed her hands before turning to leave. Benjamin leaned his hands against the wall and looked down, allowing the water to run down his firm back and lean legs. His breathing was starting to get messy and his handsome face was tinged with a steady blush. He wanted to control his feelings, but he couldn't help as he kept thinking about her hands touching him all over. Not only did he fail to control his thoughts, but they became even wilder. Orissa looked at the bathroom door in disdain. What an emotional man. He was complaining when she refused to bathe him yesterday, and now he was still complaining even after she helped him. Orissa tugged at her dampened clothes. She wanted to shower too, but she forgot to bring any clothes. There was probably time to go and buy clothes if she could find a store nearby. Should I go back and get my clothes or should I go and buy new ones? However, she didn't like wearing new clothes without washing them first, anyway. With that, she decided to go back and get some clothes. She hadn't brought Benjamin's clothes either. What is he going to wear later? She went over and asked him, "Benjamin, do you want me to go back and get some clothes for you? I'm going to take a shower there too." He didn't reply. Orissa touched her nose hesitantly. "Does he not want me to go back?" She called out a few more times and he finally replied. "Ask the butler to send them over," Benjamin said. His voice sounded a little weird. "Okay." She glanced over at the bathroom door and walked away to call Yaleview's butler. Then, she asked him to bring some of his pajamas and some of her clothes over to the hospital. "Is Mr. Graham all right?" Edwin asked in worried tone. "He's fine. He just had an allergic reaction so he needed to go to the hospital for a checkup." Orissa quickly told Edwin about Benjamin's situation so that he wouldn't worry. "What did he have an allergy to? Was it serious?" Edwin asked. "He feels much better after getting a jab." Orissa then asked, "Edwin, please bring some clothes for me too while you're packing Benjamin's pajamas." "Got it. I'll send them over as soon as possible." Edwin quickly went to pack. Now that he knew that Mr. Graham was in the hospital, it explained why none of them had come home yet. As Orissa folded his blanket, she began to realize that Benjamin had been in there for a while. "Benjamin, are you still not done yet?" After a few seconds, the door suddenly swung open and she felt a gust of vapor against her face. Next, Orissa met Benjamin's penetrating gaze and she was taken aback. "Oh, you're finally done. I asked Edwin to send some clothes over." Benjamin walked out of the bathroom and sat on the bed. Orissa went off to find a hairdryer and helped Benjamin blow dry his hair. Benjamin glanced at her. Why is she so obedient now? He hadn't even said anything, and yet she helped him dry his hair. His gaze suddenly shifted and he looked at her wet clothes. He could basically see everything she was wearing inside. His expression darkened. Chapter 259. Orissa was still drying his hair when she realized that Benjamin was staring at her. She followed his gaze and noticed that her clothes were almost transparent. She turned around with a flushed face to put the hairdryer away. Benjamin's eyes glinted with mirth. You don't actually think you can seduce me with that body, right? His voice was teasing in a meaner way than usual. Orissa had had enough of it and turned back to glare at him. I'm not trying to seduce you. Really, you could have fooled me, Benjamin said as he continued to stare at her chest. Orissa glared at him. My shirt only got wet because I had to bathe you. He continued staring at her with an intense gaze. He was sitting on the edge of his bed with only a robe laid over him which wasn't even tied tightly. His collar was open, exposing his firm, muscular chest. She quickly looked away and felt her face grow even hotter. Wait, what do I have to be shy about? If he's not afraid to show it, then why should I be afraid to look at him? Besides, I'm his wife now. Who cares? Orissa glanced openly at his amazing figure. As expected, Benjamin's body was also flawless. Even men would be ashamed at how boldly she was staring. Her eyes glinted slyly. Take off your shirt so I can apply medicine for you. Benjamin looked at the woman who was ordering him around and smirked devilishly. Are you sure it is right for you to boss around a patient like this? Orissa gritted her teeth at the sight of his cocky expression. She walked over with a large smile. Since Mr. Graham seems to be occupied, then I'll help. She untied his robe and slid it off slowly, purposely letting her fingers linger. Benjamin's stomach tightened and his eyes darkened. The heat in his groin that he was trying to suppress was rearing its head again. Shit, stop playing with fire. Orissa laughed inwardly at Benjamin's reaction. She smiled brightly and turned Benjamin's face around as she whined. Mr. Graham, didn't you want me to be your girl? Are you going back on your word? Didn't you say you don't like my figure, and yet, your body is saying otherwise? Aren't you being a little hypocritical? Well, don't worry, I won't laugh at you. She slid her finger down past his firm abs. Feels pretty good. Her hand continued traveling downward and he grabbed her wrist with a dark look in his eyes. Are you sure you want to continue? Orissa only wanted to tease him, so she pulled her hand back with a smile after his warning. Do you need me to put the ointment on for you or would you rather do it yourself? He glared at her. She's doing it on purpose. His face tightened and he pressed his lips into a straight line. Do I look like I can do it myself? You're right. You can't, Orissa replied with a smile. At the sight of his dangerous stare, she finally gave in. Okay, fine, I was just teasing you. I'll help you apply the medicine. She stopped teasing him and started to apply the ointment on him properly. That's too much. Benjamin cringed at the thick layer of cream on his face. The more you apply, the faster you can heal. Despite that, she still wiped off the excess and applied it on his neck instead. Benjamin's heart was racing at the sweet scent of her body. He was trying his best to hold back and turned around. She just glanced at him. It didn't really matter because either side would have been the same. After applying it on his back, she pulled off the robe and asked him to lie on his stomach. Benjamin was finally going along without putting on an argument. Seeing that, she quickly helped him with the ointment on his back and flipped him over, and do the same for his front. She couldn't help but notice one particular area that was rather impressive and her face started to heat up. She tried her best not to feel awkward and only helped him put on his robe again after she was done. Chapter 260. Orissa went to wash her hands and Benjamin's gaze trailed her. When he noticed how red her ears were, he smirked. So she's not that daring after all. After she came out, she kept the ointment and poured a glass of water for him to down his medicine with. You should take your medicine now. Benjamin frowned as he looked at the white pills in her hands. No, Orissa widened her eyes. Why is he acting like a child? How are you going to recover if you don't take your medicine? Benjamin glanced at her before laying back on the bed and picking up his phone to work. Orissa didn't know what else to do apart from pushing it in his direction once again. Gently, she coaxed, take it. If old Mr. Graham were to see you like this, he would be so worried. You wouldn't want the kids to see you like this either, right? Are you threatening me? He asked with narrowed eyes. No, I'm just worried for you. Just take your medicine so you can get well faster. Then you wouldn't have to get any more injections. Orissa put it right at his mouth and continued to convince him. If they're too bitter, I can get you some candy. Benjamin rolled his eyes and downed all of the pills in one go before drinking some water. At the sight of his tightly knitted frown, Orissa quickly went to the coffee table and got some grapes. She quickly peeled one and shoved it into his mouth. It won't be bitter after this. Benjamin's annoyed expression immediately softened after the sweet taste of grape spread in his mouth. Go and shower or you'll catch a cold, he said firmly. She glanced at him. So he knows how to care for others. My clothes aren't here yet, she said as she sat aside. Benjamin frowned. Go and shower anyway, they'll be here soon. She turned to look at him and saw how serious he was. Then, she finally got up to check if there was another towel in the washroom. Only after that did she close the door behind her to take a shower. Benjamin called Edwin to ask him to hurry up and Edwin told him that he was already on his way. Ethan brought some files over to Benjamin and heard the water running inside the bathroom. After glancing at the door, he looked over only to see Benjamin staring at him with a hint of warning in his eyes. Ethan lowered his head and no longer dared to look anywhere else. Mr. Graham, I'll come over tomorrow morning to get these files. Okay. Benjamin indicated for him to put the files down and Ethan reported about Jack to him. Jack is back, but I didn't tell him you were here. You don't need to tell him. Benjamin frowned. Jack was known for having a big mouth. Ethan nodded. Thankfully he didn't tell Jack anything. If he had rushed over here, Benjamin wouldn't have been able to rest properly. Mr. Graham, are you feeling any better? Benjamin glanced at him. I'm fine. Ethan smiled at the good news. If that's the case, shall I head back? Benjamin just waved at him. On the way out, Ethan bumped into Edwin. Ethan, how is Mr. Graham feeling? He's fine apart from some mild rashes, Ethan replied. After a quick greeting, he left. Edwin brought the 2 bags of clothes to the room and knocked. Only when Benjamin's voice called out did he enter the room. Hello, Mr. Graham. Benjamin glanced at Edwin. You can go home after putting down the things. How did you suddenly get an allergic reaction? Are you feeling better? Edwin put down the bags and came over to look Benjamin up and down. He seemed perfectly fine, but his face was still dotted with a few red patches. I was allergic to some natto that I ate, but I'm already feeling much better. Don't tell Dad about this. Benjamin continued saying, let Gavin and the others stay over there for a few days. Please don't let them know that we are here. I got it. Please don't worry, Edwin said with a nod. You can go home, Benjamin said as he picked up the files, ready to look through them. Edwin looked at him and said, Mr. Graham, are you sure you don't need me to stay back and help you? I have Orissa, Benjamin replied without even looking up.